All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday. It is a gloomy day out today, but that's okay. My name is Elise. I work for TCC Canada, and we are an A to Z business solution provider. So we offer things from virtual office spaces all the way up to permanent office spaces with everything in between. We do flexible office hours, so if you need a meeting room here and there just to get away maybe from a busy household, or you're looking to plunk yourself down into a more permanent space, we've got that option for you. Currently, while everyone is self-isolating and in quarantine, we've been offering webinar services for all of our community in order to help them, support them through this time, because we know that this is difficult for businesses. So we want to make sure that we're giving them as much value as we can while we are at home. So we have got Rob Campbell with us today. We are so thankful for him to take the time to help us through working through sales and creating a plan. So I'm going to pass it off to him and we'll get started.
Excellent. Thanks, Elise. So it looks like Tristan is probably the only one with us at this point. Tristan, are you muted? Because it'll give us an opportunity. If it's just Tristan at this point, it gives me an opportunity to be a little bit more focused on more like his business. So if I know a little bit about what he's doing, I can kind of customize him a little bit for it. But failing that, then if you want to jump in at any time, Tristan, if you're not muted, certainly feel free to do so. I'm going to take you through this as pretty quickly, rather than pare it down and just give a portion of it. Like basically, my whole Take Aim program is here. I'll only be diving into certain parts of it. So, you know, if you have questions, reach out through chat, and hopefully Elise will be keeping an eye on that. But essentially, Take Aim is it's a framework. It's not sales training. I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, but there is some sales training involved. But this is about having an actual plan, the step-by-step plan for making sales. So, you know, a lot of people look at sales as, you know, what happens after the sales come in sort of thing, is handling the customers and processing those sales. But Take Aim is all about the outbound, going out business to business, doing sales. So I start off with this slide. Oh, I better do the screen share here if we're gonna get started, right? Share that. Okay, so I like this quote from Jim Rohn. It says, "Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better." And that's the beautiful thing about sales, is that, you know, with some other things, yes, you can get better at it and you might be more efficient or effective. But with sales, if you get better at sales, you make more money. That's the way it is. Like, sales is sales, and the better you are at it, the more revenue you will generate. So Take Aim is the process and the system for doing that. So I start off with this, we've all seen a lot of it lately, but I've been professing this, have a tattoo of it, the whole thing, for the last 10 years, about crisis being made up, the Chinese symbol for crisis being made up of two symbols, one for danger, one for opportunity. And I've been a believer that when most people are running around saying the sky is falling, other people, entrepreneurs, for example, are looking for where there are opportunities, because when there is change, when there is crisis, there is opportunity always. So, and kind of Take Aim, the whole story came out of that. And something else as well, again, crisis, and just over 200 years ago on this continent, native tribes had no trouble knowing where their next meal was coming from. There was plenty of buffalo, millions of buffalo, so far as the eye could see at times. So they weren't having any trouble. But then suddenly, after centuries and generations of hunting the same way, everything changed when the European settlers came. So they could no longer do things the way that they used to do them, right? So I used to have this in my office when I'll tell you a little bit about my story in a second, but this was on my door basically saying, if that's your answer because we've always done it this way, then don't lead with that answer. Like, think it through and go, is it the right way to do it? So, you know, it's always about not getting into bad habits and just the path of least resistance. So what we're going to talk about today, it's all about business to business. So depending on what your business is, Tristan, you know, if you're business to consumer versus business to business, if I'm dealing with a business to consumer person, I'm usually saying to them, okay, but look at the business to business angle, because there is a way to generate more business for yourself through business to business, whether it's common denominators of business people who have employees and your way of marketing to them. There's a number of ways to utilize B2B tactics, even in B2C, but this whole program was built around business to business sales. So I don't know if you've had a chance or not to look to see what my background is, but essentially, let me back up a little bit here. So my career has been in professional business sales, raised in a family business, and then went on to a career in advertising sales, hospitality sales, and then into the office equipment and technology industry, where I spent most of my career. very, very well trained in professional business-to-business sales. I thank companies that I work for that, as well as myself, but I've had the benefit of a lot of sales training over the years and a lot of practical experience. And then my experience shifted to entrepreneurship later on. And then at one point, there's a whole long story in there, but I went through this awakening, basically lost 4 family members in just over a year and was very much seized the day. And, you know, there's no dress rehearsal and all of that sort of thing. So I ended up buying out my biggest competitor. You know, they had 40% market share. I was looking at my future, my succession planning, going, I'm going to keep on working at BDM. You know, my biggest source of new business was their customer base. And the owner was getting a little older and, you know, his kids weren't coming into the business. So I'm looking at, gee, I don't want a branch or a manufacturer to buy it out. So I bought him a big step, little guy eating the big guy. And that's where Take Aim came from. So when all of a sudden, now I've got a sales team of people that I've been competing directly with for 15 years, my biggest competitors, and I was taking their customers faster than anybody else. So there was no love lost from them to me. And in fact, when I first got there, the original owner said to me, you know what, I've heard every story as to how evil you are, as to why they lost deal after deal against you. And in the end, we had a nickname for you here. It's called the Golden Throat, because they somehow just seemed to think I spun some sort of magic tale and wooed their customers away. And that's not what it had been. And you'll see as we go through this. So I had these sales reps that, you know, I knew they were veterans. I mean, I couldn't say, okay, I'm going to throw sales training at you, because they all had been at it for a long time. But, you know, different ones had different strengths and weaknesses. And it wasn't really sales training that I needed. I needed something else to get us all singing from the same hymn book. And if you've ever heard of a book called Spin Selling from a number of years ago when solution sales first came onto the scene, Neil Rackham wrote that book, and he had a quote that said, a good sales process can help ordinary mortals perform like rock stars. So I started laying out for me what I had been doing to beat them. And I don't know if you've ever had to do that before, but taking something that you've been doing naturally and through learning and experience, and I had become who I had become, and doing things the way I was doing, I never had to explain it to anybody. I just did it. Now I had to figure out how to explain to them how I'd been taking their customers on them. So basically, I kind of laid out all the steps. I knew that the difference with me was it wasn't about closing sales. It was about building relationships. And you'll see a quote a little later I use, but it's kind of the way that I do business. You know, success in sales and business-to-business sales is less about selling stuff and more about creating people who want to buy stuff from us. So that's kind of where I was at. I went from the time that I first meet them, or even before that, like, what is it that I'm doing that I know they're not doing? Because these 3,000 people, businesses that are my customers now, they were just my prospects. And I was picking them off reasonably easily, quickly. So now I needed to stem that tide, make sure nobody else could do what I was doing. So that's where Take Aim came from. It was for my own company. I had an office equipment company. I had a team of salespeople selling office equipment as well as office furniture, technology, and, you know, all different personalities and types. And Take Aim became a way that we were going to do business from a sales point and from a whole company point of view. But basically, it broke down the relationship process into 7 steps: target, approach, connect, expand, acquire, integrate, and maintain. 7 steps to creating B2B customers for life. So at that time, literally, it was words on a whiteboard, me explaining to my team how we're going to do this, and we did. And so as we go through the program today, you'll see this is all stuff that, I mean, we were just coming up with that was going to work for our company. I was never intended to be a speaker or a trainer or anything else, but this worked so well. And there's nothing else like it on the market. Everything else is kind of training. It's into sales training. And, you know, that's the bucket that Take Aim falls under, but it's not sales training. So Take Aim, I'll continue to tell you a story, went from that to becoming an actual thing, because a coach at one point said to me, have you ever thought about being a speaker with this Take Aim thing instead of it just being the knowledge that you have? Like, once I'd semi-retired and sold the company and stuff. So that's how I ended up getting into this business. But what I started to say is that it's not sales training. If you're new to sales, you know, or some experience, but not a lot, depending on what kind of business you have, independent business, solopreneur, etc. You know, you might have some sales training, you might have none, and you will find value in this program out of that for sure. But if you're a seasoned salesperson, you're going to see stuff that you've seen before. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. This is a framework. Okay, this is a framework, a 7-step framework for relationship sales that works in any B2B environment. Very customizable, and that's why you think of it like it's a framework. It's not the whole house, it's the framework. It's a malleable, adjustable framework depending on the size of the organization you have. So I like to suggest that sales training is one of the tools that we use in professional sales. So we've got all kinds of tools that we use in professional sales, but that is sales training is among them. So here's some of them. So for example, our skills and abilities, our work ethic, our intellect, our interpersonal mastery, our own personal and professional networks, our professional training, including sales training, our business acumen. These are all things that are tools of the trade for us in our business of professional sales. So unfortunately for many salespeople, this is what their toolkit looks like. I mean, the skills are all there. Everybody applies them differently. And that's very much what it looked like when I took over my team of these 7 salespeople who were very different from me, very different from each other. Nobody was singing from the same songbook. Nobody really had a process. The skills were all there. And very much it was like, okay, sales is just supposed to go do what it does. And industry by industry, you might have seen that where people just go, well, just sales, just go sell. And that's what salespeople are for. So for me, this wasn't going to be of any help. Like I needed to know where, for example, if I had a rep that was weak in a certain area, I could partner him up with another rep or partner her up with another rep, or, so starting to understand what tools I had as the owner of the company and as the leader of the sales team, what tools did we have at our disposal? So think of it this way, that if you're in business, you are in sales. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Doesn't matter what your business is. If there's no money changing hands, you're not in business. So you have to be in sales to be in business. But depending on your business, your sales toolkit will be of varying sizes. If you're a solopreneur in the flower business, the floral business rather, your sales toolkit is going to be much, much different and much smaller. Again, B2C versus B2B, et cetera. But the idea is that, we all need certain tools. Like if you look at the little one in the upper left corner, I mean, that's a basic little toolkit. I mean, your average business person, when it comes to sales, that'll be plenty. I mean, you just need to know the basics about making sales and building relationships, et cetera. You get into a little bit bigger company with more employees, et cetera, more customers, you need a bit bigger toolkit, you get into et cetera, and so on and so on. But the next thing is that for each one of those toolkits, you could get a whole bunch more tools. You could go way deeper, like get detailed, like, you might just need a hammer. Let's just go back one, go previous here. You might just need a single set of pliers, a single ratchet, one set of Allen keys, the basics, right? But by the same token, if you look at the next one here, look at all these different screwdrivers that are available. Now, you might not need them. If you're a solopreneur, you just need that little toolkit. You don't need all of these. But then depending on your business, maybe you do. But every business is different. Like, well, one business needs to drive into the screwdrivers and understand and have every single screwdriver available. Other ones need the wrenches, and other ones need the ratchets, and different tape measures or saws. Or these are all things that, if you're specializing in an area or depending on what's applicable, you're going to have more of that. So with Take Aim, you'll find as we go through it that, again, more like the toolbox, right? It's not the tools. Take Aim is about teaching you, where the tools go and that sort of thing, right? But it's not sales training. So where there's areas where it might seem like, oh, well, you get into more detail there. No, my job is not to reiterate what other people have said better and can say better. There's books on the market, there's courses on the market. It's not about diving in and filling this up with stuff that other people have written before. It's about showing the structure, the infrastructure, and the framework and the methodology of Take Aim, because that's where the power is the whole. So whether you need a little wee tiny toolbox working all the way up to something like that, Take Aim, the structure remains the same, but can grow from being a solopreneur business to being an international, multinational corporation. It's all about sales, whether it's individual, team sales, it's about relationship sales. So that's basically what Take Aim is. It's not a sales pitch for Take Aim as much as to tell you what to expect today as we're going through this. It's not about training you in sales. It's about showing you a framework that you can now use for your own business and apply whatever is unique to your business within it. So the first thing I had to do before even getting into Take Aim, I had to take these reps and kind of put them on a scale of where do they rank with regard to the basic stuff that we need to know how to do, or knowledge and skill levels that we should have, attributes, personality, all these sorts of things that, before you get into actually selling, what are the parts that make up a good salesperson? Like the kind of the checklist. So I came up with the top 20 B2B Sales Essentials at the time for my reps, that I can compare them. I'm not going to go into each one of them. I'm just going to let you scan down the page, but you'll see that with each of these, some of them, it's hard to tell what it is from the name, but they're all things that are general skills and attributes and things that every single person could look at that and say, in defining success, okay, do I know what success is? Yeah, I want to be successful, but have I actually done the exercise to figure out what that looks like and then reverse engineered it back? Attitude, the whole glass half full, glass half empty thing. There's a bunch of them. I'm going to share a couple of them with you here before we move on today, but that's basically what the top 20 is. Before we get into Take Aim, these are skills, attributes, knowledge, know-how, etc., that you should have a handle on or know the areas where you need some work in. That's the foundation on which we're going to build our framework. So habit number 2 is about attitudes. So it's not just about positive, negative. We do know this analogy, the glass half full, the optimist sees the glass of water, pessimist sees it as half empty, optimist sees it as half full. Well, our whole methodology with Take Aim and mine comes from a different perspective. Sales professionals and entrepreneurs just see a glass of water and start looking for someone who's thirsty. We don't get caught up in yes, you want to have a positive attitude, but the positive attitude is, I've got water. I don't care if it's half full, half empty. I got water, and I know there's thirsty people out there. Let's go find them. It's really that simple. That's where it begins. Essential number 5 is how sales and marketing feeds the tribe. So there's 3 basic ways. One is fishing. That's your broader advertising, your mass marketing type thing. You're throwing a big wide net out there, or you're using bright shiny lures which require the fish to bite, basically. So that's the difference with the fishing versus the others, is it requires the fish to be in the right place at the right time or to actually bite the bright shiny lure. Regardless of how bright and shiny you are willing to pay for, they still have to bite it. So that's fishing. Farming is cultivating your existing accounts. If you've already got customers that are there, make sure that you're maintaining those relationships, that you're getting everything that you can out of those relationships and maximizing the fruits of that crop. And last but not least is hunting. And that's what Take Aim is all about, is what are we after? Where are we going to find it? Let's go get it, and be very targeted and direct and proactive and intentional about what we're doing. One of the other essentials is that before we can hope to make a sale, there's one thing that must transfer from seller to buyer. It's enthusiasm. Sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. There's all kinds of ways to look at enthusiasm. Somebody could be desperate. Well, they're enthusiastic because they're desperate. They could be enthusiastic because you've done such a great job of making them and transferring the enthusiasm you have for your company and your product to them, and that's why they want to buy. Or you've done a great job of transferring the enthusiasm about certain features of your product or service. So the fact of the matter is that is the business that we're in. We're in the business of transferring enthusiasm. And so we have to have it ourselves. So this essential really is directed to for salespeople to know, yes, you're transferring enthusiasm, but even more so for owners and managers to understand that with sales being a transfer of enthusiasm, you can't just give your sales reps a price list and links to the website and say, off you go, bring me in your quota or your budget. We as owners and managers have to continuously infuse the enthusiasm into our people so that they have the enthusiasm to transfer to their customers. So what a lot of owners and non-sales people don't realize is that, yeah, sales can be tough. It might look really great. We get to drive around, we expense accounts or cars or however non-sales people see it. I actually talk about the wall between sales and non-sales people in the top 20 as well. But, it can look like that. But at the end of the day, we know as salespeople that we face rejection every day. We hear a lot more no's than anybody else. And a lot of times, customers or would-be customers like picking on salespeople because it's their opportunity to vent, or, they've been treated badly by somebody else. Or so all those things that, salespeople know that we face those things, and that's fine. But it's a standard part of the job that management and ownership needs to understand, that we have to help make up for that. We have to do things to infuse that enthusiasm. So I actually call it infusiasm. So infusiasm is actually one of our top 20 B2B essentials. So Take Aim itself, here's what it stands for. Target, time is money, where are you investing it? Approach, opening the lines of communication. Connect, setting yourself apart by getting yourself within. Expand, the more you know, the more you can help. Acquire, this is where we're pen meets paper and we're securing the relationship. Integrate, this is where we ensure a solid foundation for the new working relationship. And finally, maintain, the customer is now yours to lose. So this is the 7 steps of the Take Aim process. Once we've gone through the top 20 B2B essentials, this is now the process that we're going to use for getting customers and keeping customers. That's the purpose of this process. So first of all, let's go. So again, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I'm not going to dive in real deep in some areas, but you'll get the gist. So Target time is money. Where are you investing it? First of all, we have to figure out what it is that we're after. So we start off, there's 3 different types of targets that we are after as sales professionals and as business people. First stream is our personal targets, our goals, our objectives, and that sort of thing personally. I want a corner office. I want to learn French. I want to, these are personal goals and objectives. We do talk about goal setting in the top 20 B2B Essentials. We get into it a little bit more here, but it's really more a matter of, okay, now we're starting to bring in our focus in what are we targeting? Let's not mix things up. Let's not carry them over. So personal targets are personal targets for you. Financial targets are, you might have quota to hit. You might maybe have to be able to make payroll. Either way, there are financial targets for us to hit. And those could be tied back to our personal targets. So maybe one of my personal targets is I want to be mortgage free by the time I'm 60. So I say, okay, well, in order to do that, I have to make a certain amount of money. So that becomes part of my financial targeting then. You see, so those are 2 separate things: personal targets, financial targets. So my quota, my budget, yes, that's a target, but that's separate. Then the other target group that we're talking about is our clients and prospects, the companies, the organizations that we are after. So those are the 3 types of targets that we identify first. So we're going to skip right through the client and prospect ones because that's going to be the most help to you going forward, is how do we find more new customers, etc. So first thing I do is I break down our client and prospect targets into 4 target groups, essentially. This is what, as I'm going through lists, as we're going to talk about lists, as we're going through lists, I'm looking essentially for 4 different types of customer / prospect categories. So first of all, there's current customers. So this is my existing customer base. Second is future customers, people who are prospects and who might deal with us. Thirdly is synergies. These are people from whom revenue can come, but not directly necessarily. Not our prospects and customers, but maybe people who know our prospects and customers, or that's what a synergy means. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. And last but not least, we're looking through for competitors as well, because we need to know who they are. So we're not looking for them as prospects, but as we're going through and we see business names, we want to recognize the ones that are our competitors as well. And we want to know as much about them as they do. So current customers, I'm going to back up one step even further. So not only are we not talking about the new customers yet, we're talking about our existing customers, but we're first going to talk about our internal customers. And that's just quickly looking around at who you work with, who needs something from you in order for them to do their job to help you fulfill your promises. So look around, you understand who your internal customers are, what they need from you, and make sure you shore up the fences with those relationships as well. And then next is your external customers. So we're going to talk a lot more about this. This is what the whole maintain phase is maintaining our existing customer relationships. But I mention it here simply because as we are beginning to target and figure out where we're going to go, and you'll see when you start seeing business lists and companies that you want to go after, hold the brakes, because we want to make sure that we are allowing enough time in our daily schedules to be seeing these existing customers. If you're a brand new business and you don't have any existing customers yet, you could skip this whole section because we're going to cover it under maintain. But right now I talk about the importance of your existing customers. Just because you've sold them doesn't mean they're going to be there forever. So make sure that in your regular daily or weekly activity plans, you've got room in there for customer care, whether that's sending emails, whether it's making phone calls, whether it's dropping by. Again, we're going to talk about processes that we've got before with the sale or losing the sale, etc. So your external customers, this is your existing customer base. And again, it's just about working an appropriate type and frequency of contact into your regular schedule. Your top 10 accounts, we're going to talk about targeting later, but even when it comes to your existing customers, you might have a top 10 existing customers that you do absolutely anything for. Your next 100 might get a Christmas card. Your next 1,000 might get an email, etc. We're going to talk about that again under approach also. So under future customers, where are we going to start looking for them? I mean, as a sales rep, you can stand there at the front door of the building and say, okay, off I go, but where am I going? So here's some of the places that we're going to, before we walk out the door, that we're going to be looking for opportunities in businesses to do business with. So first of all, geographic, vertical, and horizontal. Those are some basic ones. Okay, so am I limited to where I can do business based on where I can service it? Or can I do business internationally or realistically looking at within that geography? Also vertical. So, I mean, do I sell a machine that every dentist in the country should have? Or do I sell a certain, or is our dentists the people that I'm after and I've got multiple products for them? Or do I have a product that works for dentists and doctors and chiropractors? And so, we do that in the taking process. We actually bring all that down and we start narrowing those to where are we going to find opportunity for your company in the industry that you're in. So this gets really specific really quickly in Take Aim, because we're targeting the organizations and the customers and the entities that represent potential for your own individual business. Excuse me. Lists are a big one. We're going to talk a lot about lists, how to get them, etc., what they mean. The demonstration that I do, I'll come back to that in a little bit. So process of elimination is another one. You started looking at a list and who's not a customer yet, but who should be. Referrals and testimonials, those are like referrals mainly. I mean, new customers can come from actively working on referrals. So we're going to talk about referrals a few different places in Take Aim, also how they're used in the approach, etc. But referrals can actually be a stream to say, we want to take our existing customer base and make more like them. So we are going to go on a campaign to generate referrals. And then networking is a big one. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. And not only do we meet prospects there, but also synergies. So those are some of the areas that we would dive into as far as where are we going to start sourcing our revenue, our business, our prospects. So then we start looking at our most wanted list. So a top 10, top 100, top 1,000 targets. So again, you might have we're going to jump ahead a little wee bit here to talk about approach, only in that, like you can have a top 10,000 prospects and you're going to go, well, I can't possibly reach out to 10,000 people. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Again, depending on your business, depending on your industry, you might say, well, my top 10, I'm going to send them a singing telegram, something extravagant, to really catch their attention. The next 100, I might send them a registered mail that they have to sign for. The top 1,000, I might send a first-class piece of mail to. The top 5,000, I might just send an email. In the top 10,000. So again, knowing how I'm going to approach them and what approach strategies and methods and modes I have at my disposal will determine how many targets make sense. Because when we start getting these numbers, if you give me a top 100 companies, we're going to do the math and go, okay, you should be able to reach out to 3 of them a day or whatever. So how long is it going to take you to get through that 100? Again, you're not going to get sales right off the bat. You're going to initiate 100 new relationships potentially. But it's about starting to really target and not just have pie in the sky stuff. This is who we're after, and we're going to work this relationship until they become a customer. So how you prioritize them into your top 10s, there's a bunch of ways of doing that. A lot of sales reps focus on what I call white whales, the big ones. I mean, oh my gosh, if we could just get that one. If I had $1 for every business person, entrepreneur, who has shown me a product that they say, well, once we get into Home Depot, we're going to, that's their plan is when they get the big fish, right? So I'm telling you that in business-to-business sales, those white whales can represent a tremendous time loss, and in the end, essentially trading 4 quarters for a loonie because there's not a lot of meat left on the bone because there's been so many sharks swimming around it the whole time. So, don't get caught in the trap of white whales necessarily. It's good to have a couple of big accounts to lend credibility and, if they deal with you, then it must be okay to deal with you. So there's strategically feathers in the cap and that sort of thing where it makes sense, but don't get caught in that. But there's tons of other ways that we can prioritize who we should be seeing and when. Like, depending on pricing models, temporary specials, etc., that might raise certain people to the top 10 because you need to reach out to them now. They're your top 10 now because now is when this applies to them. So your top lists can change as well, but it's always about being very targeted in what you're doing every single day. So I'm just showing you this quickly. This is how we build out, for example, 10,000 prospects. This is a tool that we use in Take Aim called the targeting matrix. And so the first thing we do is you'll see at the top, they've identified 8 out of 10. We start with 10 as a goal, but what I call perspectives or target groups. So different perspectives that businesses can have on your product or service. So for example, commercial is different than institutional. This product that we're talking about here was a mold product that I actually took to the Dragons Den for the inventor. We didn't get a deal, but I did get to present to the Dragons. So for that product, their commercial prospects would have a different perspective than their institutional prospects. Service companies would have a different perspective. Resellers, influencers, fundraisers, licensees, retail. These groups all had different perspectives on this very same product. And so it's about understanding who's on the other end, why do they need it, and we uncover and create those first. Because once we have those, now we can lay them out across here. You see, we take those and we lay them out across. And now we start looking at the types of businesses that are under each one of those or that would be under each one of these, right? So think of it like you can use the SIC code list, which it can be very big and overwhelming and cumbersome, or something as simple as the yellow pages list, that sort of thing. So categories. So you'll see here as we go across. So under commercial, we had service clubs, dive stores, hydroponic shops, spas and pools, fitness centers, sports shops, all the way down. And you just keep going. This is kind of a brainstorm, free flow sort of thing. But you know, when you start with a list and as you're going down the list and kind of going yes or no, it's amazing what comes to mind. You know, if I said to you now, give me 10 types of companies that you do business with, you could probably think about it and come up with them. But if I showed you a list of 1,000 different business types and you were going through them, you'd be checking the ones off that you know that there's potential in. You'd find a lot more of them. So the idea here is that once we've established the types of companies that fall underneath those categories, now we can get a list. I can get a list of all the service clubs in the Ottawa area, for example. I can get a list of all the dive stores in Ontario. I can get a list of all the sports shops in Canada, or whatever our geography is. Again, we set all those parameters when we're setting up our bullseye and our target. But this is how we break this out into actually having lists. The next page of this would be a single page for each one of the prospectives, and then a tab for all the different companies, all the different service clubs under service clubs. So again, laid out across. So service clubs, dive stores, hydroponic shops would be laid out left to right horizontally, and underneath each one, the list of actual service clubs and actual dive stores and actual hydroponic shops that fall underneath those. And so what you'll also find is that often categories will appear under more than one heading, which is fine. All that does is that raises them up on the priority level because we're hitting them on multiple facets. They must have real interest in our product. But this is the tedious and often boring part for it. We haven't picked up a phone yet. We haven't made a phone call yet. Nothing, no emails. We have not started approaching anybody yet. This is all about targeting. And just like in gold mining in the days of the prospectors, the better the job that the prospector did in locating the big deposits of gold, the richer they became. It was less about how efficient they were at mining the ore from the ground as it was about finding where the gold deposits were in the first place. And that's what we're doing with this. Yes, it's tedious, but so was bushwhacking in the Yukon looking for gold. This is an awful lot easier than that and can be done, you know, in a very comfortable setting. Yes, it can be boring, but you know, I've always looked at it as just like sifting for gold. All these names of companies are like nuggets. I got to figure out which ones are the gold, which ones are fool's gold, and which ones are just sand, etc. Okay, so we talked about our existing customers, internal and external. We talked about where we're going to go find future customers, etc. Synergies. So synergies, these are anybody who can help you in your quest, but not necessarily in buying from you. They might also buy from you. They might also fall under your prospects list. But they are people who can introduce you to people, give you access to relationships you might not have had otherwise, refer you. There's all kinds of benefits. So here's where some of them can come from. So networking and referral generation will come from business and trade organizations. So if your industry belongs to an association of some sort and they have gatherings or now online gatherings, take part in those. Complementary businesses. These are people who have similar businesses to you but don't sell the same thing. You don't compete with each other, but you deal with the same prospects. Networking groups, BNI, chambers of commerce, etc. Volunteer groups, service clubs, personal interests, like anything that you do when you're out and about, recognize that all of these people work for a living. And while you don't want to be the life insurance person who's running around handing out cards and asking everybody about what their financial future looks like, you do want to be able to talk about what it is that you do and offer and open up potential opportunities for these people to refer you or somebody who knows somebody, and that's how you really grow your network. Working the room is, again, I can't dive into a lot of detail here. We don't have a lot of time, but the point here is that if you're going to go out and network, and most people know, they've been told that networking has to be part of what they do. It's finally been recognized in the last few years. Networking is really important, but you know, you see them go to the event and then they find somebody that they know. They spend the whole events with that person or a few people that they know. Maybe they already even work with them because they're shy. They don't want to go and introduce themselves. They just are uncomfortable. And so that's where, again, in professional sales, we've got to get past that. If you're going to go to a networking event, standing in the corner and hoping people recognize your face and know you were there isn't enough. Like the purpose is to generate gold nuggets or find out where they are through this. So I have a technique I call talking to the tribe that's developed specifically for networking environments. It works in sales as well, but it's about identifying who your potential avatars are that you would be talking to at a networking event and being able to keep the talk track on point, but at their level, essentially. And last but not least, the elevator infomercial. So always being able to say what it is that you do, but without it sounding like a pitch or, so having it, we'll talk more under approach about introductions and that sort of thing, but everything from 5-second to 60-second introductions, because when you have the right moment to be able to pull the right arrow from your quiver is important. And get involved in what you do. So lastly, with competition, again, as we're identifying companies as we go through lists, competition is one of them. So, and the reason that I bring this up here mainly is because a lot of companies, I'm proud of their own pride in saying we don't have competitors, or we're alone in what we do, and there is some truth in that, and we can say that we don't have any. But the reality of it is that you will always find somebody out there who considers themselves competing with us. They can do what we do. So whether we consider them competition or not, they certainly do. And more importantly, could our prospects and customers consider them competition? Would they think to call them instead of us? So understanding who our competitors are, first of all, we have to understand who we are and what we do and all the things our products and services do. But we have to understand our competition. So what are they? Who are your competitors and what are their wares? So you really can say, instead of saying, well, they're not a competition, you can say, well, they are in the similar industry. We don't really consider them a direct competitor because they did it. So when we can speak knowledgeably to that, see how the difference that makes than simply saying, well, I don't know anything about them, but we, knowing that you're knowing as much about your competitor as they do shows what a professional that you are. Who's out there. You're not just simply here saying we're the best thing since sliced bread, you should come and do business with us. No, we know who is out there in the market and what we're up against. So when I say what are your advantages and disadvantages, we're all programmed to know what all of our advantages are and what all of our competitors' disadvantages are. Well, switch the tables, meaning every one of our competitors is trained to point out our disadvantages. So if we don't know what they are, if we can't see how somebody else could paint something as a disadvantage, then we're ill-equipped to be able to handle it. And I use an example, I'll make it really short, but in the Pitney Bowes days, there was something that our competitors thought was going to be something they could use against us. But part of the whole approach and dealing with the customer, we would lay that out as a benefit of how we did business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time our competitor came in there and said, well, here's the real story, they already know the real story. They've heard it from us, and now it's a win-win because he's just making himself look bad by reaffirming something we've already talked to them about and painted in a positive light. So if you don't know what your competitors are going to try and paint in a negative light, you can't possibly paint it in a positive light first to lay the foundation. And so the other thing to keep in mind is, why do your future customers currently deal with them, and why do they choose them in the first place? Going in there saying, well, we're so much better, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe there was a real specific reason why they chose them in the first place. So just don't make assumptions and understand that. And that's the target module, which we spend a lot of time in when we're actually doing Take Aim, because this is where all the gold is going to come from, right? This is the prospecting. This is the going through lists and pouring through stuff to figure out, where is my business going to come from? What's the low hanging fruit? What's the higher hanging fruit, etc. So once we've done all that, assuming now we've got our list of our top 10,000 prospects, or, broken down our top 10, top 100, top 1,000, top, whatever that is for your organization. We've got that now. We know who it is that we're after specifically. Now it comes time to approach them. So there's no second chance to make a first impression. So it makes sense to put some thought into what is our approach going to look like. So a few things to consider when it comes to approach. First of all is doing your homework. What do you already know? So now this is on a case-by-case basis. It can also be across target groups. There will be some commonality between businesses. But here's the homework we want to know. What do we already know about them, about their company, about their industry, etc.? So make sure we know what we need to know that way. What assumptions can we make? Right now with COVID being what it is, we can make some assumptions about that people might not be spending money the same way. So looking at every situation like that is, what assumptions can we fairly safely make? Not that it's always safe to assume, but again, we want to cut to the chase. We want to get to where we're doing some good. So we want to know what assumptions we are safe to make. And then creeping. When I started in professional sales, yeah, I'm a dinosaur, but there was nothing. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have LinkedIn. We didn't have social media. We didn't, to research a company, it was very difficult. Unless there was articles written about them somewhere, there wasn't really a lot of information. You couldn't Google a company name and find out almost everything about them. So in today's world, it's so much easier to do the homework that we should do before we do our approach. I call it recon as well, right? So just kind of getting the lay of the land and seeing what's out there. So our approach strategy, there's a number of different approach strategies. Every company can have a different type of approach strategy, but there's some people just have one overall. This is our approach strategy. We put advertising out there and the phones ring, or we do social media campaigns and the phones ring, or the emails light up, or this is our approach strategy. Or some of them have different approach strategies depending on the target groups or the actual size of the companies or whatever the case may be. So approach strategy also includes approach angle, which I talk about here, top down, backdoor, synergy, social media. This is the angle of approach that I'm going to take within a company. So am I going to start at the top and have them introduce me to who I need to meet? Am I going to start at the back door because it's easier to meet somebody there and have them introduce me up to where I need to be? Am I going to use synergies to get an introduction to a company so that I don't know where I'm going to come in? It depends on where that synergy has the connection. So all these things are, how am I going to approach? What angle of approach am I going to take on this individual, whether it's target group or an individual company? And then approach method. Well, there's two basic approach methods, cold call and warm call. That's it. So they're either expecting to hear from you or they're not. Or they know something about you already or they don't. So, we can turn cold calls into warm calls often, especially with things like LinkedIn and social media, where we can find out who do we know that knows them, and 6 degrees of separation. We can always find a common denominator possibly. So we can convert cold calls to warm calls, but at the end of the day, it's going to be one of the two. If we're reaching out, it's one of those two. So under, cold, well, the same thing applies to both. It could be in person, it could be by telephone, personal mail, digital, like an email or social media reach out. Like there's different strategies within each of those. If it's a cold reach out versus a warm reach out, obviously. So warm call is going to come from leads and referrals and introductions and that sort of thing. That's really going to help with the warm calls. Obviously, if somebody says you've got to call so-and-so, they can really use what you have. Or, hey, I was talking to Bob about you. He's expecting to hear from you. Or, again, the difference between a referral, somebody telling me, hey, Rob, go and see so-and-so. He might need you. You tell him I told you to come or whatever, versus that customer picking up the phone, calling the third person saying, listen, I'm going to send Rob over to see you because that's an introduction versus referrals. So all kinds of ways that we can, again, turn that cold call into a warm call. And then last but not least here is approach image. So, again, I've had the benefit of actual training and on image, for example. What colors should I wear or should I not wear? I would have thought that was something that was simple, but I remember it being assessed, and I had always wore a half Windsor tie. Like back in the days when we wore ties every day. I knew how to tie a half Windsor, never thought anything else about it, but learned the little things about where to use a double Windsor and, how to eat, what spoon to use, all that kind of stuff. I've had the benefit of being trained on that, but understand that this is the time that you have to be able to see yourself from the outside and say, am I a nail biter? Do I pick my fingers? What things do I do that I might not even notice that I'm doing? Because it's the impression and the image that I'm setting. So everything from what I'm wearing, am I wearing the proper attire? Again, it's much different today than it used to be, business attire versus casual, business casual, etc. And then collaterals, like what things do you have to continue selling for you after you're not in the room? We're at almost 10:45, so I'm going to, believe it or not, speed up even more. That was the bulk of the stuff was in target, and we're into approach now. But introduction, understand that when you're reaching out to introduce yourself to somebody, they have 3 questions. Who are you? Why are you here? And what's in it for me? Why should I take the time to listen to what you have to say? So you've got to have an opening statement that has an intro, a benefit statement, and a trial close. Understand that before you've reached out to them, they may already know something about you, whether through your advertising, through your marketing, through word of mouth, reputation, etc. Next, we're into connect. So this is, yes, I know connect is spelled with a C, but 2 things. Say same didn't make a lot of sense. And the connect phase is all about the kind of the quirky, the things that we can do to set ourselves apart by getting ourselves within. Like I said before, success in B2B sales is less about selling stuff, more about creating customers who want to buy stuff from us. So some of the things, some salespeople can connect really easy. Hey, they got the right price, the features, the exclusivity, no big deal. Other people, hey, they've got a great style and they're really gifted gab, and lots of people are in sales for that reason. That's easy to connect in that way. Or they've got, they're the only one in town with a particular product. Professional salespeople use these things, communication skills, professionalism, reputation, referral expertise, service levels, and differentiators to show their professionalism and to connect themselves to their prospects. CRM, if you're not using a CRM at this point, you should be. Don't put it off. You can get a free one online to start with. You can always scale it up later. There's lots of them available. But everything that we're doing in building relationships, that's our repository for the information that we're gathering. So you might think you're going to remember it all as you're making this relationship and you walk out the door going, oh, we're going to be friends forever. Well, when you have 100 more like that, you're not going to remember all the details. That goes into your CRM. Perspectives, the big thing in connecting is understanding that every single person has their own unique perspective on the world. And our job in sales is to understand their perspective so we can sell to that. You know, one of the habits of highly effective people says, seek to first to understand, then to be understood. And that is key. I mean, we can blather all day if we want, but if they're not hearing us the way that we're speaking, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? We want to understand the audience that we're speaking to so we can phrase it in such a way that they're going to understand it. A better one even a wacko thinks he's got a point. So apply that one in your life on a day-to-day basis and look at it and go, you know, when somebody says something that I think is whack, then I would go, oh, they're, you know, we can do that. But if you stop for a second and go, he thinks he's got a point. He might be wrong. I don't have to agree with him to understand him. That's the big one. I do not have to agree in order to understand. So give yourself the time to understand where somebody's coming from or what their perspective is so we can speak to that. Really quickly here, if you've never done this, have your colors done or whatever. I'm an orange, you know, people are blue, green, whatever the colors are. It has to do with personality traits. And while every person is different, like a snowflake, there are patterns of behavior that people fall within. Another one when it comes to business is bank. So this is not just about people and personalities, this is buyer personalities. So you'll see a blueprint person, a blue person is stability, structure, systems, planning, processes, predictability, etc. Whereas a red, the action person, you know, is about freedom and flexibility and spontaneity, action, opportunity, excitement. Different strokes for different folks. Our job is to understand who the folks are and what it is that's going to light them up, basically. So there's a whole thing around bank and colors, et cetera, but it's about understanding who your customer is. Expand, we're going to expand our knowledge and our understanding. We do that by asking lots of questions, both open and closed questions. Closed questions, yes, no answers. Open questions, essay answers to get them talking and knowing how to use a mixture of both. Understanding the lay of the land now. Who are our friends and who are our foes? And, you know, what am I dealing with here? Like, I can't just stay on a single track necessarily dealing with the person that I'm dealing with. I've got to take into account who else is involved in the decision. And in the business to business, there's an average of 5 people involved in every decision. So understand that the person you're dealing with may not be the only person that you should be reaching out and knowing. What we do in business to business professional sales is we consult, we personalize, and we recommend. It's about having as many arrows in our quivers as possible to be able to know how to expand the relationship and talking points, topics, etc. The more we know, the more we can help, remember. Spin selling, we talked about Neil Rackham. That's situation, problem, implication, and need. It's when you're doing solution sales, you apply that to every single one where you go, what is their situation? Identify what the problem is, because if there's no problem, there's no solution, and we're doing solution sales. So what is the problem? Then what is the implication of that problem? And therefore, what do they need? So a little 4-step process for how to sell a solution approach. Under promise, over deliver always. As the temptation will be there. We'll talk about it under closing, but to keep on promising, etc. But always under promise and then wow them by over delivering. And proposal writing, it's just a matter of, you know, yes, it can be a handwritten thing on a napkin if necessary, but I won an awful lot of deals over the years because I had an actual proposal, a multiple page. Didn't have to be War and Peace, but it did break things down, financial considerations versus features and benefits, etc. And it was kind of a system. Versus, you know, competitors who would give a 1-page quote or a 2-page quote or an estimate. There's a difference. So understand proposal writing versus an estimate. Acquiring the business is closing the sale. If we've done our job so far, it should almost be like handing over the keys. We're done. Like, it's a natural result. But what's the first thing we have to do if we're going to close the business? Is ask for it. And so I'm going to suggest that you Google closing techniques. I normally would have a slide that I would show. I don't even know how many. There's tons of different ones, really funny and comical names to many of them. The key is that you can take a number of those and you can reword them to work for you. So even though they might have a cute, weird name, the Ben Franklin close, the puppy dog close, the porcupine close, all these, there's a meaning behind it. When you read those, you will see some that go, oh, that's perfect. I could totally adjust that for me. So this is not a closing techniques webinar. This is where you'll use them. This is where you can get some really quick, easy help as far as closing techniques. Just Google it and get the list and understand them. Trial closing, this is knowing how to ask little questions leading up to before you ask the big question, because if you aren't asking any questions and you get to the end and they say no, you don't know where you lost them. Whereas if you're getting them to, as you go along, asking little questions and they're kind of in agreement as you go along, not likely they're going to turn around at the end and go no. You're going to find the no somewhere along there. So handling objections. First of all, handling objections is a part of the game in professional sales. So you can anticipate what some of those are going to be. Oh, it's too expensive. We can't afford it. Some of those things are going to be standard. You'll get them. Feel, felt, found. We don't have time for me to share it with you today, other than I'll give you one example. You give me an objection and I could say to you, well, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Customer, but the case is really this and da-da-da. Yes, that might work, but it's very much more confrontational. Feel, felt, found is I understand exactly how you feel, Mr. Customer. In fact, many of the people that I deal with today felt the same way initially when I first talked with them. But what they found over time was that cost justified itself and blah, blah, blah. So instead of doing this, I brought them around, feel, felt, found. So don't forget that one. Establishing time frames when they say, hey, thanks very much, Rob, I appreciate it, we'll get back to you. You never leave it with that. Like you're a professional as well, managing your time. So getting a kind of a time frame for what they have in mind. Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking 6 weeks? Like, not a pressure thing, just so that I know to keep track of it. There's no point in me calling you in 6 weeks to bug you if you're not even going to look at it for 6 months. So that's part of the relationship you're building with them. And when you've made your pitch and you've done everything that there is to do, stop talking. Okay, so this is where the overpromising can come in. If they haven't said yes, the quiet is uncomfortable. And try it sometime. The quiet is excruciatingly uncomfortable. So, but being able to bite your tongue, because the silence is just as uncomfortable for them. So they're more likely to come back with a yes after a prolonged silence. If they say no, well, we're not done at this point. We're building relationships. So they might have said no this time, but down the road they might, depending on what they're selling. Again, I was in the office doing business, so people leased 90% of the copies were leased, so their lease was going to come up, etc. So it was a recurring sale if we continue to win the business. So we continue in the relationship. They're in our CRM. Any contact we have with them, we can continue to make sure we have contact on a somewhat regular basis, whether it's once a year, just to keep ourselves in their face, etc. And then, so now let's say you did make the sale. Close the sale. Yep, congratulations. We're off to the races. But that's not it, is it? Because the salesperson might think their job is done then, but all they've really done is submitted a bunch of paperwork, and now the work comes in actually delivering on what we promised. We have to integrate. And so as the keeper of the conduit, we're responsible for knowing everything we need to know. Both sides, right? We know the company side that we represent, and we now know the customer's side. We have to understand who all is going to be involved in it from the beginning to end, like who can influence its success or failure, make sure that we're involved. So I use the example, the integrate phase. The reason that that's a phase, I don't need to go into a lot of detail here. It's simply this, that if you've ever watched a relay race, and have you ever seen one runner toss the baton to the one in front of them and hope for the best? No. There's a place called the exchange zone where runners coming in, the other runner begins running. So they match speed. The first runner reaches forward, the one reaches backwards, and it's a seamless transition. And that's what we're talking about at Integrate. You've been carrying the ball, you've been carrying the baton with the customer all this time. Why would you just toss it to the admin staff now, or whoever's going to make it all happen? We're still holding it for a short period of time. It's only a split second in the relay race where both hands are on that baton. The integrate phase doesn't have to be a long one, but it does have to be a smooth handoff. And the onus is on the salesperson to make sure that while they still have ownership of the ball or the baton, that it's getting done. So instead of looking at it like, oh, my coworkers are, nagging me for not crossing my T's and dotting my I's. Guess what? You're a professional. Dot your own I's, dot your own T's. Don't rely on the admin person who's on the same wage, getting maybe pizza for staying late on month end, whereas you're getting a commission or profit or whatever the case is. So crossing T's and dotting I's are part of the profession. And last but not least is that we're in the maintain phase. So once we've got a customer, it doesn't make any sense to lose them. I didn't want to have to sell one more extra photocopier on a monthly basis because I was losing another customer out the back. Like, once we have them, let's make sure we keep them. This whole phase is about that. We're decommoditizing the customer. Our reputation is based on the customer's perception that we delivered on our promises, right? We can say, yeah, the deal is signed, the deal is done. As far as I know, it's delivered. We might think, but it's not done until the customer's perception is that it's done and we've delivered, because we're the ones that promised. Defining what customer satisfaction is as well. If you've got a 188 number to Bangladesh and that's what you've got somebody with a big book or a screen that they're going to read stuff off to them, yeah, that's customer service. But there's a difference between that and being a local company that they phone and they get an answer, so understanding what customer service is and what customer satisfaction is, and not making assumptions. A couple more things here under maintain. I grew up in a family business, and back in the days when they used matchbooks to advertise, this was the slogan that was on it. My dad explained to me, You know, some people will, you can ask them and they'll say everything was fine, but then they'll leave and they'll tell somebody else, well, the fries were cold, the waitress was a little bitchy. Even if it was legitimate, they don't want to be seen as complaining to us, but they'll tell everybody else. So we have to not be complacent. We have to really want to know the answers. Like they can't feel intimidated like that they're complaining. Like they have to know that we want to know, because if we don't know it's broke, we can't fix it. So that's what that's all about, is not assuming that everything's fine, actually asking and actually wanting to know the real answer and not being defensive when we get it. Okay, it's all about decommoditizing the customer. We can do, depending on the nature of your business, we can do annual visits, quarterly visits. We can actually have a survey where we ask them, how are we doing? And based on the things that we want to know how we're doing it. Again, our CRM plays a huge role here, keeping all the information. Having a maintenance plan, well, here's what happens. From the moment they say yes, it's all scripted. Here's what happens. They get a letter from the president a week later saying, thank you, welcome aboard, we can't wait to work with you. Then we get a letter, or, you know, an email a day later. From all of that can be scripted, and it can also be scripted when you lose a sale, to say, when's the next natural time to follow up with them? Okay, well, certainly not right away, but, you know, let's put it in there for 6 months from now. Now I can forget about it till my CRM tells me it's time to follow up with them. And much of that can be automated as well, where it's an automatic letter that comes in. It just comes to you for signing, maybe even. If you're going to reach out and touch your customers, understand there's an awful lot of noise out there, especially now. So it's got to be these things. It's got to be relevant and timely. It's got to be personalized, growth-oriented. It's got to inoculate them against your competitors. The stronger your relationship with them is, the less likely your competitor is going to be able to get in there. And we were building your relationship one brick at a time. So last thing I'll share with you in this is I use a little process called C. If you're reaching out to your customers to have a touch with them or whatever, the customer care, each one must see the relationship. The purpose of it is to see the relationship. That's to strengthen the relationship, to expand the relationship, and to extend the relationship. Strengthen it not by talking about the weather and the senators or the easy stuff that everybody can talk about. Try to find things that are unique to them. Your CRM will remind you if they were dropping their daughter off at school or whatever the case is about their personal life. You can put that in your CRM. It'll remind you of that. That's how you strengthen. Expand means, is there anything else we can sell them? We've got a conduit going here where we've got product and revenue flowing through it. What else can we add to that conduit? And last but not least, extend is, okay, they're buying everything they can from us, but who else do they know? So can we get referrals from them? Can we get testimonials from them? And so again, in the program, we get into how to generate those testimonial letters, etc. Be proactive, not reactive. If there's a potential of a complaint somewhere, don't hope for the best. Get on top of it before it becomes a problem. And last but not least, just we're back. You see how we started the whole take game process with our existing customers. And that's where we're finishing. Again, talking about our existing customers and a complete loop, basically. And that is Take Aim, with 2 minutes to spare for questions. And let me just stop share.
That was incredible. While people are, you know, funneling in if they have any questions or whatnot, I just want to say, like, the tactics and strategies that you use are very different than things that people tend to promote and market. And I loved the danger and opportunity is what crisis is made up of, because a lot of people, especially right now, are so afraid to be selling.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a touchy spot, because I do think there has to be some sensitivity to the fact that things have shifted and changed, but that shouldn't mean not selling. It's a pivot of how you're approaching it, right?
Absolutely.
So,
especially right now, like this is, I talked about the downtime. Like when we were talking about the target phase, the hardest thing we usually have in working with companies in the target phase is getting the salespeople to stop long enough to actually pour over lists, because it can be quite tedious. Nobody likes the idea of it, but I can tell you it makes a huge difference. Like I said during the session, that, you know, I might be able to rhyme off 10 companies off the top of my head, but if I scroll down a list, I'm going to find a lot more that's going to raise a flag for me going, hey, opportunity, 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 right? So it's incredibly important to have that in front of you and to be able to now, we've got this time that we can be researching, we can getting lists, we can be doing the homework on the companies that we're going to be going after. So when the shackles come off, we're the gate. Like, we're not waiting till then to start thinking about how are we going to do this. We're thinking right now how we're going to do this. Where's our low-hanging fruit? where's our revenue going to come from? What are the 10 companies that should be our customers? Name them. Where are they? What's their address? How am I going to approach them? There may be 10 different approaches because they're 10 different companies. But the framework works. It's an action plan for starting today to figure out where your revenue is going to come from. So again, it wasn't sales training per se, right? I mean, I can do sales training, but the key as you go through there, everybody's going to find something different where, oh, I know all about that, I'm a specialist in that, whereas there's other areas where they might go, oh, I could use a little bit of work, right? So it's about knowing where do you need the work to fit within the framework.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe something that scares people at this point where they're getting this probably a little bit of extra time to really dive deeper into their businesses and see where their weaknesses are. And nobody wants to hear that they have weaknesses, right? That's a hard pill to swallow, especially in a business that's probably funding your income and whatnot, but it's so necessary. And the fact that you mentioned that it's building trust and not sales is so important, because sales is going to create, it could create income short term, but the relationships and the trust is what's going to build it long term. You need that longevity. So I think that's a really important thing for people to remember, that you're building relationships. And then the rest will follow.
The whole take game process is about exactly that. It's not about closing sales. It's about creating relationships and having a fence around your customers that they're not going anywhere, right? So like I said, when I took over I had to shore up the fences, make sure customers weren't going anywhere first, right? And that fence is about the relationship. How strong is the relationship? That's why I said when you're reaching out to your customers, yeah, you can talk about the weather and you can talk about the same stuff all the other hacks talk about, but the professional salesperson knows those little things about connecting with people, and that golf trophy on the wall, okay, or on the thing. Fine, it's easy fruit, but to find ways to connect with them like that, and that's what builds a relationship. Having the cheapest price does not build a relationship. It might get you the deal, but that relationship's only going to be as strong as long as you holding the lowest price, and those aren't the kind of relationships that we want.
Yeah, and with relationships, you don't have to have the lowest price. You can charge what you know you're worth, and people will still buy it because they believe in you. So I think that's great. Thank you so much for taking the time. It looks like it was a very useful session. I know I got a lot out of it, and I'm a rookie when it comes to all of this, so it was incredibly informative. So thank you again for taking the time. And if you want to rewatch the session, you can. We're going to be posting it on our YouTube page as well as on our resource page on our website. So you can always go back and check that out again. And I'm sure Rob is more than happy to answer any questions if you have them for him. So we'll attach his information into the description bar of all of our stuff as well, so you can go check him out.
Excellent. Elise, thanks so much. Pleasure to be here today. Good luck, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.